Today we are going to talk about properties of suspensions. Now suspension is also a kind of a mixture. Okay, and what are the properties of such mixtures? The first property is that suspension is a heterogeneous mixture, which means that the constituents of a suspension are not in the same ratio throughout the volume of the mixture. Somewhere the constituents may have some kind of a ratio, at other places the constituents may have some other kind of a ratio. The second property is particles of a suspension are comparatively larger compared to particles of a solution, and so the particles of a suspension can be seen by naked eyes. Now this is quite clear, no need to explain. The third property is that particles of a suspension scatter light. What do you mean by that? Now suppose you have got a vessel, and in this vessel there is a suspension. What is the example of a suspension? The example of a suspension is soil or dirt or mud in water. So suppose you have some soil mixed with water. So this is a suspension. You can see the particles of soil because they are quite large compared to particles of a solution. Now suppose if you have a flashlight like a torch and you put some light, we have seen in earlier case, in the case of solutions, that this light passes through the vessel, passes through the mixture and comes out from the other side, and we can see the light on a screen. However, in the case of solutions, we do not see the path of light, but in the case of suspension, we can see this path of light. The path of light will be seen through the suspension. That is because the particles of a suspension, they scatter light. And why do they scatter light? Because particles of a suspension are comparatively larger compared to particles of a solution. So now that brings us to the fourth point, and the fourth point is particles of a suspension settle down when left undisturbed for some time. Now because they are large, so they settle down. So suppose if we leave this mixture for some time, what will we see? We will see that all this dirt and soil, whatever is there in water, it will gradually settle down at the bottom of the container. So we say that a suspension is not a stable mixture. And finally, we come to the last point, and the last point is the particles of a suspension can be separated by process of filtration. That is because the particles are quite large in size and they do not pass through the pores of filter paper or filter cloth. So these are the properties of suspensions. We'll come back in a later video to look at some other properties of other types of mixtures.